Namaste everyone, this is Dr. Ayesha Butalia. Today we are going to talk about the deep reinforcement and context-based machine learning. Machine learning, when we go into the advanced, it has got a reinforcement learning based upon the experiences. Till now, we had studied to make the machine intelligent based on the past history that we were calling about the prediction model based on the data mining techniques. We had also discussed about the descriptive model based on the qualitative approach, whereas the previous one was the qualitative approach for feeding the algorithms using clustering techniques. When we assume the experiences for learning systems, it is called as the reinforcement learning. And when we add a deeper layers into the experiences based on the environmental and context, then that type of reinforcement learning is converted into deep learning. So deep learning is nothing but environment-based and context-based machine learning. Sometimes context is also termed as environment. The example in our previous lecture, we had taken about these sentiments. If the person is crying, the tears may be because of happiness or some past remembrance, some memories, or maybe because of sadness, or maybe some person tried to hurt right now, some few minutes before. So depending upon the context, just by looking at a person, we cannot judge that the person is crying only due to sadness. It can be the tears of happiness. But if we add the environment variables, then they convert it into a context-based learning, and then we can have more accurate result of the same situation. Let's have a look with the diagram which we had seen last time. The concept development, basically, if we design a normal machine learning and a data mining model, it is based on the concept development, concept-based learning, depending upon the past history or empirical data, which we call this as the predictive model using data mining. So more the historical data, the more accurate prediction using data mining algorithms you can achieve. Then you have experience-based learning, which we call it as the reinforcement learning, for which the ANN artificial neural network is the best used approach. For data mining, I have considered rough set theory because it is very good technique for handling the soft computing uncertainty and imprecision in the data. So I find it very useful for classification as well as clustering algorithms defined by the same rough set techniques for predictive as well as descriptive model. So depending on this, we can design our predictive and descriptive model using the data mining and machine learning algorithms, or which you actually call it as the pattern mining. Based on the experiences, you have a reinforcement learning. This reinforcement, when you involve the case studies and examples with the help of context using the environment variables as discussed right now, with the help of that cry person, then that is called as deep reinforcement machine learning and data model. To make it a more perfect so that we, with the help of the statistical methods and strategies, we have the accuracy in our decision outcomes, our classification and clustering, which is actually the outcome of our entire model and algorithms. we should also include logical reasoning. So taking the example of how the context-based learning is included in our normal behavior. If we look at this hand gesture over here, the Bharatanatyam dancer is using the bow and the arrow hand gesture to depict something. Now over here, if you see both the images, the hand gesture is the same, but the expression is different. Here, the expression is subtle, depicting bravery. And here, hand gesture being the same as above, but it is depicting anger. So this is a sign of bravery, and this is the sign of anger, maybe trying to hit someone. In second case, you can see this diagram. Here, the facial expression of everybody is neutral and the same. But since the hand gestures are different, it depicts the various incarnations of Lord Shiva. So just trying to highlight the context behind hand gesture and facial expression. If the hand gesture is same, but the facial expression is different, the meaning is different. If the facial expression is same, but the hand gesture is different, then again the meaning is different. So if you're working on a hand gesture project, you can add facial expression as the condition attribute for context. If you are working on expressions, facial expressions, then you can consider hand gesture as one of the context. The more context you will add, the more multi-perspective your project will become. So multi-perspective is nothing but the logic reasoning which we were discussing in our previous diagram. So coming to the guidelines to design the machine learning model as per the previous diagram in detail. First, we collect the data set or the data sets by the sampling methods. Then formation of training set and set from the collection of data sets is decided. So using the 80-20 rule, we have to decide which samples to take for training and which samples to take for testing. Basically 20% for training and 80% for testing. Then knowledge-based database are used. So you need to extract the exact samples using feature reduction algorithms so that the more accurate the data is. We have discussed about how to handle the outliers or how to handle the missing information so that the more apt information you have, the more appropriate your data set would be. So that is basically to develop a knowledge base. Then identifying of patterns from the empirical data, that is historical data, examples, and appropriate learning example mechanism. So using all the three paradigms of machine learning, that is supervised, unsupervised, reinforcement, we try to identify the patterns. So modification of strategies and learning mechanisms to train components of concept-based models according to the requirement of the machine learning system. Now, once you identify the patterns and the paradigms, you need to modify it according to your project, your requirement. For example, it's related to images. So you need to classify your algorithms which are appropriate for image processing. If it's a text classification, then you require text mining algorithms. If it's an animation-based projects, then you need to have a video mining algorithms. The next step is classification and clustering of patterns to perform decision-making process using appropriate selection of algorithms. As I always say that machine learning and data mining go hand in hand, which use the prediction model and description model accordingly. So prediction model is classification, descriptive model is clustering, which respectively uses supervised and unsupervised learning. So combining those using semi-supervised learning, and then identifying the patterns from both to have an appropriate decision-making process model in which the algorithms would be incorporated. The selection of algorithms would depend upon whether it's more of a predictive or more of a descriptive or the combination of both. And we have discussed about this in our previous lectures, how to select algorithm appropriately. The next step is reinforcement learning by context-based approach. So this is the deep learning. Over here, we had already discussed about the learning mechanism using concept base in which even experience come into picture. That means reinforcement learning was over here also. But the moment reinforcement learning, now in our next step, we want to go it in a more deeper by using context-based approach and the environmental variables, okay, which leads to the rewards that may be positive or negative depending upon the input. For example, in our previous lecture, we had given the emotion surprise. So surprise can be a negative emotion or it can be a positive emotion, right? So that is going an emotion surprise into polarizing into negative and positive sentiment, right? So we are going into more deeper classification. That is why reinforcement learning by context-based approach is nothing but the deep learning. Of course, if we use the logic reasoning, then and using different environments, not only using only one approach, then it will become a multi-perspective approach. For example, if we are identifying sentiments by facial expression, so this is one parameter or one context which we are learning. For example, in our hand gesture recognition, we are using emotion as one context, right? We can use audio also as another context. So more context attributes we add on, that is, you make it vision by different perspectives, okay, then obviously it will incorporate improvement in your decision process. So the meaning is multi-parameter optimizations lead to a better decision process. So context can have different parameters like audio, expressions, emotions, even the way the person walks. Many other parameters can be added to make it a more multimodal and rather a multi-perspective visionary model. And last but not the least, augmentation of trained data. Augmentation means you need to represent that data. You need to tag that data, classify that data so that you have a vision to cluster the algorithm. So going to this example, this is a sentiment-based classification, decision table rather, where these are the condition attributes, say A, B, C, D. And based on these condition attributes, we are classifying the sentiments, which is our decision attribute. So for example, this is a hand gesture. We are calling it as Hasta Mudra in Bharatanatyam, which is named as Arala. Now, Arala means drinking poison, right? But Arala also have different meanings apart from drinking poison. So Arala also means blessing. It also means describing. It also means holding umbrella. It also means looking with astonishment. It means dignity of men, self-admiration of women, etc. So looking at the Natya Shastra, all these meanings have been defined and derived for this particular single hand gesture called as Hastamudra Arla. Now, how to analyze that which meaning is apt at that particular instant by the performer of Bharatanatyam? So it depends upon the expression which is called as rasa. There are navarasas, that means 9 expressions. Depending upon the expression, shoka means sadness. So all here it is shoka, that is emotion is sadness. So if the emotion is sadness and the hasta mudra is arala, the sentiment again can be classified by depression, intoxication, sanity, insanity, discouragement, despair, joy or contentment, right? If the expression changes to Adbhuta Rasa, that is surprise, then there is a question mark. We have to analyze that. That was a challenge for this learning system. So it will go on to the training set to find out. Then next, if the expression is Rasa is Veera and emotion is courage, then it is indignation. Similarly, if the hand gesture is same, emotions are different, the meanings are different. But here, if you can see, even if the emotions are same, the meanings are different. That means we need to incorporate another attribute as context to solve this problem. So what we did, we took context as the orientation. So if the orientation of this particular gesture were at different places by the performer, the meaning would change. So this is the perfect example which I wanted to share with you during our project, which was based on sentiments of the Abhinaya. Abhinaya means a Bharatanatyam dancer performs a dance in which the performer tries to depict a story. Abhinaya means a story through her facial expressions and hand gestures. That is called mudras. But a person who doesn't know the Carnatic music which is going on or doesn't know these gestures, okay, so how it would be related? So we had designed a storyteller but which analyzed the expressions and the hand gestures. But since we had the challenge that the same hand gesture had multiple meanings, we incorporated different context attributes to solve our problem. So here, if you can see, the concept is the Abhinaya, to find out the story behind the Abhinaya of the dancer. This is the concept. So if you see about our previous model, this diagram, this is the concept. What is the past history from the Natya Shastra? That was our past history. We found out that these mudras had so many meanings. From the experiences, we find out that where we had the challenge, that same expression, same hand gesture, but it was giving different meanings. From the experience which we took from the dancers, we came to know that the orientation can add to the picture to solve this problem. So this experience we got from the performers itself when we discussed with them. Then the case studies and examples also depicted the diagrams which I showed, that the same expression but different hand gestures gave us different meanings. So these were this approach, that for hand gesture, sometimes we used expression as a context and vice versa. This type of analysis we found out from when we saw a lot of case studies and examples. And then using all these three and approaching the context which we discussed, we use the logic if then else, which we fed in our decision table as discussed here. And using then if then else, we actually found out the exact sentiment. Now once we saw the set of sentiments, we designed another algorithm which we would be discussing in our next lectures about the rough fuzzy approach to find out the story, mood of the event, etc. We could find out the Abhinaya. So the next step would be the logic behind these sentiments to find out the exact meaning of the story. So this was all about the example which I wanted to quote regarding the deep reinforcement machine learning and data mining model. Various examples, such examples I would be discussing in our next lectures. For example, to identify different classification of faces and then find out the characteristics of each, then signature analysis, handwriting analysis, palms, etc. So keep watching the videos for different examples. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can post me on the email or on the group. I would be very happy to share. Thank you.